There are 11,600,000 women-owned businesses in the United States. Today, on Focus on Business, we're going to talk to some women business leaders who will share their experiences. The Small Business Association of Michigan recently published a study on women in business. Women in business in the United States employ over 9 million people. Lori, tell us some more about this study.
There's really some good news for women in this study, women business owners. Nationally, it's showing that women-owned businesses, small businesses, are growing across the United States. Almost 39% are women-owned businesses. And in Michigan alone, 40,000 are Michigan-owned businesses, small businesses.
And yet, with that kind of growth, it's a relatively new business ownership, so there are differences. There are challenges and differences in the way that women approach business.
Absolutely. The study also shows that there are barriers for women, female entrepreneurs, women business owners. Some of those are in the areas such as funding. Women tend to ask less frequently for funding. They tend to ask for less money when they're going to seek a loan. They also have different communication styles.
Communications is a big key in successfully running a business, and I think women entering as the minority gender in business particularly run up against things like negotiating, sales language, and fierce communications when those kinds of communications are needed. But in particular, negotiating seems to be something that's a wider barrier. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, the data definitely shows there are differences between men and women when they're negotiating. Specifically, women tend to negotiate better on behalf of someone else. If they're negotiating for someone else, they're fierce. If they're negotiating for themselves, they're a little more timid. There also tends to be a gender gap in terms of experience. Women tend to be less experienced in negotiating, therefore they're not quite as good.
Well, thanks. You can get more of this study at sbam.org. I'm Lisa Smith, and this is Focus on Business. We're talking with women business owners today. We have Lisa Speaker from Speaker Law Firm and Karen Gallagher, owner of Wellness Institute of Michigan. Good to have you here. I'm citing some statistics from a piece from the Small Business Association of Michigan. It's about women, and women-owned business sector has grown 114% over the last 20 years. That's more than 2.5 times the national average compared to 44% in other sectors. Yet the field of resources and tools has not grown as steadily. And there are significant differences in the way that women approach business versus men. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. First, let's talk about how long have you been in business, and have you always been a business owner?
I opened my law firm 12 years ago, but I had worked in private practice for other employers before that.
I have been in business for 20 years, and prior to that I was an employee of another company as well. So making that transition was an interesting process to get ready to open the business.
Right, that's about risk. That's about a lot of unknowns, I'm sure, as I have also been through. So you're seasoned owners. What are some of the things that you've done to grow your business over the years?
Well, first I had to make a conscious decision that I wanted to grow my business. I had a really good foundation for the first 8 years of my business, but it wasn't really growing. It was just staying at the status quo, which was a sustainable business, but I had to make a conscious decision that I wanted to grow my business. And I did that by starting to work with a business coach. And the business coach helped me see that I had to have other tools in place to make my business grow. I couldn't just do the same things I had done for the past 8 years and expect to get the same, or expect to get different results by doing the same things I had always done. And so for me, it was, creating a business plan, having a budget, understanding financials and metrics, and make changes based on what I was seeing in my reporting. And then furthermore, with the business coach, it was having somebody to hold me accountable, because as a business owner, I was holding everybody in my office accountable to me, but nobody was there holding me accountable. And so that was a big step for my business to grow, was to have somebody to push me.
I think for me it was just a growth in the need of services. We provide mental health counseling services, and I just received an influx of service of need and hired additional therapists to assist me in providing those local services. So it was kind of a natural process. It wasn't as formal as Lisa's process, which I envy and appreciate because there are the same struggles as far as maintaining the information about your finances, about how to grow it, etc. But mine was just kind of a natural process. And so now we've expanded into several therapists.
Well, that's interesting because very different kinds of businesses, law versus mental health. And in law, the competition is extremely heavy. For your business, you actually encountered a very natural door kicking open that happened. The Affordable Care Act happened.
Yep, absolutely.
There was, as the decades roll on, there's more adoption and more people who are comfortable with accessing mental health services, right?
That's true, and actually I think from a growth perspective, we have kind of entered some kind of central focus because our growth, I think it's not just with my practice, it's with other mental health practices in the area too, that the stigma associated with mental health services and the need for that has greatly reduced, and we see that across a diverse range of cultures as well, and a diverse range of populations, from children, teenagers, college-age children or students, etc. So it really has, the stigma has greatly reduced. And I can tell that by the numbers of individuals that are coming and knocking on our door. And like I said, I don't think it's just our door. I think that it's a standard that we're seeing across the whole population.
Yeah, that's the kind of growth I think that we would all like to encounter, is just natural. Your segment is expanding. It doesn't happen to all of us. And as we think about business growth and continuing on, certainly I think that there are barriers that pop up. So I think there are barriers that pop up in any kind of business. I think women have specifically some barriers that we deal with. Again, looking at this, this guide, when it comes to risk management, access to capital, there are differences between men and women. So for example, women on average, when they access capital from a financial institution, will request about $77,000. Men, on the other hand, when they are going after a loan, they're going to ask for about $109,000. So that's a significant difference. There are differences in what women pay themselves. So these are all barriers to entry. We're already in some ways putting ourselves at a disadvantage. Can you talk about your experiences and what barriers you've encountered and maybe how you have overcome those?
I do agree. I think a lot of times women undervalue themselves, and so they don't stand up for their worth when they're going to either talk to clients or potential clients, when they're talking to vendors, or like you said, with banks. And I think definitely when I was a brand new business owner, I didn't ask for very much. I just had a very small business loan. Now that I've pushed myself out of my comfort zone, I have asked for a lot more because I have a better understanding of what my value is and understand that I can demand what I'm worth. And I think that's just something, it's a mindset issue for a lot of women in business. And I think another thing with not valuing yourself enough as a woman, business owner, is also being able to envision where your business can go. So earlier in my business, I could not have imagined the amount of growth that I've had in the past 3 years. I wasn't pushed to stretch my imagination until I started setting goals, and setting goals that made me very uncomfortable. But I had to push myself to do that. And I wouldn't have imagined that my revenues would have over doubled, or that the number of clients I had over doubled, which also means I'm helping more people. So by growing my business, I can help more people. But you have to, if you don't value yourself as a business owner, you might not even, for years, I didn't attempt to do that because I just couldn't even imagine it being possible.
I would concur with Lisa and actually support the notion that I think women, we have a difficulty with our own self-esteem, and that in regards to how far we can imagine, how far we can take our business. And I would agree with that completely. I think that there is, and I would say that that happened to me as well. I really could not imagine myself growing to the extent that we have grown in the last 4 years, from a very small situation to a very large situation. I think the other barrier is our networking. I think that we have a great bit of difficulty with finding other comrades, finding other mentors, finding women who have gone through the same struggles, identifying who those people are, reaching out to those people, and then being open enough to talk about what our actual struggles really are, and being able to talk about those private matters, retention, finances, difficulty in the community, reputation building, and maintaining. So I feel like for me, it's been helpful to identify a large group of mentors, and it can be everything from my attorney, my CPA, colleagues like Lisa, all the way to colleagues that are in the field, the mental health field, that I need to reach out to who are struggling with the exact same challenges that I'm challenged with.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, the playing field of women business owners is so small compared to the rest of the sector. I recall the first time I went to an owner-to-owner conference. I truly felt like I am with my people here. This is my people. It's wonderful to have professional development, to be with women executives, women managers, women C-level, but there is most certainly a different feel when it's ownership.
Right.
By far, I think.
We were mentioning earlier that one of the other barriers is, for example, for me as a social worker, being familiar with finances and being familiar with managing a larger budget was a definite barrier to my ability to be able to grow that and feel confident about that. So I always joke about the fact that my CPA is on speed dial. And it's helpful, but I'm not afraid to ask for that help and to ask the dumb questions.
That's fascinating. I think one of the things that I hear over and over again when I talk to women owners is that the financials are something that they're not strong in. And when you begin then to talk to women who are strong in financials, they figured it out, they know how to read it, they do have their accountant on speed dial, the numbers do bear that women are more successful with seed funding, with crowdfunding, with finding capital and bootstrapping, because we do crawl into it very specifically once we understand what those numbers can look like. Let's talk about the biggest challenges that you've faced. I guess what I'm trying to say is there are women who are going to watch the show and they're thinking about opening a business, or they're in a business, they're getting to stage 2, they're through that entrepreneurial bottleneck. And what is some advice, some things that you would want to tell them that you wish somebody had sat you down and said, do these things, know these things?
Knowing your numbers, I mean, we just talked about this, but having regular financial reports, having systems in place so that, for example, we have a weekly cash flow projection meeting with my law firm administrator. So we are regularly keeping on top of the numbers and knowing where the numbers are heading. And if it's turning out to be a bad month, we figure out how to zig or zag to fix the situation. But just being in control of the numbers and not trying to pretend they don't exist, which having an accountant was the best thing I did as a business owner. I did that before I opened my business. But just having an accountant on speed dial, it's definitely a great first step, but you have to be able to be regularly looking at your numbers and not just kind of hide your head in the sand so that you can grow your business and be in control of your business.
I would say one of the greatest challenges that I've had is in the decision making along the way. And there are many decisions that we make in terms of, I've made a physical move of my office, and I did that 2 years ago. And prior to that, I made a move 6 years prior to that. And I grew the space, and I grew the number of people that came with me. And knowing when to push that button to make that change and feel good about that, I think is very important. So the challenge for me in decision making is, again, reaching out to, or how do I address that challenge, is by reaching out and networking with those people. And I reach out again to professionals, I reach out to family, I reach out to friends, and I really talk about it. I don't keep it private. I really want to know what people think about that. You know, even in terms of advertising, what is the proper way to address that? How much do you want to put into that? How much time do you want to put into that? And I talk to colleagues of mine that are executives in the advertising field. So I feel like making the decisions, you need that kind of background to be able to go forward and to feel like it's really the right decision. And then, of course, you get to reap the benefits because we get to see the end result.
Okay, this is a very sexy question here. Process, business processes. How important has that been in the growth, in scaling up your business, implementing process, understanding process, project management?
So for us, it's been extremely important to have established policies and procedures that are written down that my employees can live by when they're answering questions from clients or vendors. And we didn't have those policies and procedures before. Everything was in my head. And we had reasons we did things for years, but there wasn't the one person on my staff and the next person, the one after that, may not understand why I had something in my head and why we did things a certain way. So getting it on paper and having the four parts of the business plan covered in your policies and procedures. So you have procedures and policies and systems in place for sales and marketing and operations and in just all the things that go into owning a business. It has been extremely valuable.
I again would agree with Lisa. I feel that I call it my infrastructure. My operations are my infrastructure. So for example, hiring more front staff, developing those policies and procedures and disseminating them to everybody that's in the office and implementing them. But again, I feel like that is something that we do walk around with. We think about it. I think about it all day, every day. I mean, it's a constant pressure. It's a constant thing. And we have also written down all of our policies and procedures and welcomed the advantages that come with that, because everybody can clearly recognize the mission, the value, the direction, etc. But the downside of that is you do have people who are, in my opinion, possibly adjusting to change, perhaps resistant to change, having difficulty, etc. And so there's some pushback sometimes, and there can be some change in the organization based on the fact that some of those infrastructure changes were not well received by some individuals. And we have to understand that. Our goal is, of course, not to have that happen or to reduce that. So I've really grown to try and be empathetic to how people adjust to that, and not just think that, oh, everybody's going to just get this and we're all on the same page, because it doesn't really work that way. We have to kind of envelope people and inform them, share with them our mission, etc.
So that leads us to a really fascinating and probably the biggest struggle named by business owners, which is talent attraction and retention. Policies and procedures, they're vital. One of the things we recently instituted is a process by which we follow so that when we interview somebody, they know there'll be a first interview, there'll be a second interview, there'll be an assessment, there will be a test, there will be an office visit, there will be a third. So those things we can now say, we have this documented, but there are things in every industry that are important to use for attraction and then retention. So what are some things that you use?
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up, because one of the challenges of being a business owner is that when you're in your early stages of your business, you as the owner are the face of every single decision and every single contact with the community. But as you grow your business, you just can't be that person for every single thing. You have to have a team in place that you can delegate responsibility to. And one of the examples I had thought of was the fact of our hiring process. I am 3 or 4 steps removed now from the hiring process, and I am the one that makes the final decision, and I do get to meet still, because my business is still small enough, I am still one making the decision about who to hire, and maybe in 10 years that won't be the case. But I am not the first one that sees a resume. I'm not the one we have a quiz that applicants have to fill out if they meet the first criteria, and then they have an interview with somebody on my team who's not me, and I don't know anything about them until after my team brings me recommendations based on the first 3 or 4 steps of the process. And so I think there's a lot of talent in Mid-Michigan, and I have not had any trouble at all finding really good talent, but you have to have a process about how you're going to find that talent and not just hope that putting out a really generic ad without sharing your vision of what you need that person to fill is going to bring the right person to you.
Definitely. Let's end with one thing. I think that owners, once you get into this position, you realize there's an emotional paycheck about business ownership. Let's just take a minute and what surprised you the most?
How invested I am in my people, and how invested I am in the company, and how much I deeply care about them. I could add one more thing. I feel like when there's a setback of any type, I really take that. That's very difficult for me. It's very hard. I feel it 100%.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today. We certainly appreciate it. And good luck to you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. So we're talking about women in business on today's show. Women are opening businesses in record numbers, more so even than men. I want to know, do you have any advice for women on communicating with their tech team?
Absolutely. It's a great question, and what we've seen historically is that men come up through the tech ranks more than women. Technology is a male-dominated field, and so when women get into a leadership position, they didn't have the background, or they may not have served in a technology position, and it might put them at a disadvantage. When they're talking with their tech people, they need to have the skills and to be able to pull information out of these guys, because that's what 90% of them are. And so that's the challenge.
All right, so what are the breakdowns in communication?
So typically what we see happening is the tech person will dominate the conversation with geek speak, adding in things like 120 GB and SSD this, i5 that, other things around that are just technology speak. We don't like that. The other thing is nerdjacking the conversation. I don't even know I'm doing it, and I could have a conversation with you and I can watch your eyes glaze over and I can tell you're not getting it, but if I'm not paying attention to those clues, then I'm going to keep on going, and 3 minutes into the conversation you're going to go, I don't have any idea what he just said. So that we want to avoid that, and it requires the communication on both sides. If I start to nerdjack you, that's a problem, and you need to put a stop to it by, wait, Jeff, okay, help me understand this. Help me, what is the benefit of doing that? What can I do? How is this going to help us grow the company or do the things that we need to do?
Well, that's great information. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll definitely see you next week on Focus on Technology.
Thanks.
Focus on Tech, brought to you by Providence, making technology easier.
Hi, Jeannie. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're president and CFO of a bank.
That's correct.
That's fantastic.
Thanks.
Are there lots and lots of you out there?
There are not lots and lots of me out there, but there are a lot more of me out there than when I first started in this business. Typically, when I go to a meeting, the lines in the women's restrooms are much shorter than the other side.
We'll take it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So as a woman who's had so much success in your career, what piece of advice would you give to women business owners?
The biggest piece of advice I would give to a business owner that's a woman is be confident in your strengths. And what I mean by that is you can have two business owners, a male and a female, and they can have the exact same business plan. And both of these business plans are going to have 10 points on them. 8 of them are going to be strengths and 2 of them are going to be weaknesses. The male's going to look at that business plan and say, look at this, I'm ready to go. Let's move forward with the next step. And sometimes you're going to see the female look at that business plan and go, oh, here are the 2 things I still don't have ready. I'm not confident, I can't move forward. And they're going to miss out on some amazing opportunity because of that. Know your strengths and be confident in your strengths.
And don't let your weaknesses hold you back.
Absolutely, we're all working on something.
That's right, yeah. What is it up? Perfect is the enemy of done?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. So women can use some mentorship. Do banks offer mentorship and support for women owners?
I can speak to that from my perspective in my bank and say that all of our lenders are acting as mentors and advisors for all of our customers. We know that we can't be successful unless our customers are successful. So anyone who comes into our bank looking for that type of advice is going to get it from our lenders.
Excellent. Any other advice you'd give to an owner outside of the banking relationship?
I think it's important for women to find other women business owners. And I think it's important for them to network and learn from those people.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Focus on Banking, brought to you by Michigan Bankers Association.
Denise, with the spotlight so publicly on the Me Too movement, how can employers respond in a responsible way?
Right. An employer needs to know that after the Me Too movement, they need to ensure that all of their staff is very aware of the boundaries and of the law. Great time to review these policies in your employee handbook. Wonderful time to bring in a human resources person to explain what sexual harassment is. And we need to remember that sexual harassment doesn't become illegal until the employee actually complains about it and the employer does nothing. So an employer who wants to manage this risk needs to make sure that their employees know that they have an avenue for a confidential complaint and that that is available to them and that they are encouraging their employees to use it.
So from leadership perspective, we need to say very clearly, we do not tolerate this kind of harassment and or misconduct, and make sure that employees know that you can speak up. Is that correct?
Correct, and make sure that they need to speak up. If they have experienced anything like sexual harassment, they need to actually speak up, because this does not become an illegal act and the employer does not become liable until the employee speaks up. You need to make sure that you're encouraging that with your employees for a healthy work environment.
Sounds good. It sounds like a very solid policy and procedure needs to get written down and be very clear and transparent.
And more training.
Yeah, more training.
More training.
Yeah, probably could help. Thanks again.
Focus on Law, brought to you by Policella and Associates, PLLC.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you got some good information if you're a woman-owned business owner on everything from banking to technology. We'll see you next time on Focus on Business.